Welcome back to Light the Fuse, the only Mission Impossible podcast that grows during a pandemic. Because I think we got a lot of more viewers or listeners now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think with our 100th and we've been doing all these watch parties on Twitter, I think we've been getting the word out pretty well. So very, very excited about that. Thank you all for spreading the word for us.
Well, and keeping with our last watch party, which was Mission Impossible 2, we're back today with the second part of our interview with Mitchell Leib, who is the head of Walt Disney Records and who produced the Mission Impossible 2 album. So, you excited about that, Charles?
Yeah, and if you remember, we left it on a cliffhanger. It looks like Tom Cruise is going to pull the plug on this soundtrack. It's not even going to come out, so we got to see what's going to happen here.
Cannot wait to hear. I hope everybody loved the first one. We'll know by now if people liked it or not, and we're just still plugging away on the second one, so, just deal with it. If you didn't like it, it's another week out of your life. Big deal. But we also talked to him about Tron Legacy. He talks to us about the Jungle Cruise score, which has an interesting connection to Mission Impossible 2 that we won't give away. And yeah, sounds hopeful that Disney and Daft Punk will be back in business relatively soon. I hope.
Yeah, we can hope. So yeah, we'll get a lot of good stuff in there. Also, just want to say up top, this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon. We appreciate Jeremy's support so much. He's made this show possible. So thank you to Jeremy so much.
All right, well, let's go into Mitchell Leib Part 2, and we'll be back afterwards to wrap things up. And please enjoy Kevin Blumenfeld's legally criminal remake of The Plot.
They had Tom, who had just decided that he didn't like the record. He wanted me not to put out the album, and he wanted me just to put out the singles and produce the music videos. And again, I had a lot of conversations with him and explained how economically it was going to be very damaging to me to spend the kind of money that I had spent. I mean, Metallica was $1 million deal. Just on its own. Wow. It was going to be economically just crippling to me to not be able to put out the album, because the album is how I monetized it. I'm benefiting from the marketing, but I'm not economically benefiting from the marketing unless I've got my full, 19 at the time, again, albums were still selling, and you were still selling albums for anywhere between, sometimes you were pricing them at $20, $19.99. Like, the revenue that was being generated from these things was gigantic. And I was just coming off of, Save the Last Dance, man. Hollywood Records is making nothing. Not one artist is selling. They're making no money. And Save the Last Dance generated something like, oh my God, $150 million in revenues. So now I've got this, and it looks like it's going to generate another walloping amount of revenues for the label. And Tom decides he doesn't want the record, and Paramount calls and says they don't want us to put the record out. And Bob Cavallo's losing his mind, as head of the music group. He's like, I need to talk to Tom. And he's being told Tom's not going to talk to anybody but Mitchell. He doesn't need any circle bigger than that. And he's like, that's ridiculous. Mitchell works for me. Tell Tom he needs to speak to me. I'm sorry, Bob. Tom's not going to speak to you. So I'm in the awkward middleness of this. I've got this great record. Everything is just about to go to fucking shit. He's going to fucking blow up the record on me. Like, what? This is just, and I'm like, how can I where friends come in. One of the great music supervisors, independent music supervisors who's ever lived, is a guy named Danny Bramson. Okay, Danny Bramson. And Danny Bramson was Cameron Crowe's longtime music supervisor for all Cameron's movies, which are so musical. And Cameron had just come off of doing Jerry Maguire. And if you remember, Jerry Maguire, the music in Jerry Maguire was fantastic and really helped define what that movie was. And it was really Danny and Cameron's relationships and such that got the Bruce Springsteen track that was a heart and soul emotional moment of that movie, and Ricky Lee Jones, like really and so I called Danny and I said, do you have a relationship with Tom Cruise? And he said, of course I do. We're buds. We're buddies. I think they had just done Vanilla Sky as well, or they were in the midst of Vanilla Sky. And I said, Danny, I need a solid, man. I need a favor. You got to help me, and you got to call Tom and talk some sense into him because he doesn't understand what I've done. He said, well, what have you done? And I said, I made this incredible, amazing hard rock record for Mission Impossible. And he said, stop. Tom doesn't like hard rock. I'm like, Danny, I know, but like, I've got an unbelievable record. And I was so kind of shaken that I wasn't even talking about Metallica. I wasn't even talking about Limp Bizkit. I was just talking about this record. And I said, my God, I took the theme and I had Limp Bizkit do the theme, but it's now a rocking song. I got to play this for you because it's a one listen record. He's like, Limp Bizkit? Oh God, Tom's going to hate that. And I'm like, no. Tom loves Limp Bizkit and he loves what I did with Metallica. And Danny says, stop. You got Metallica? I said, I got Metallica to do the only song they've ever written and recorded original for a movie. He said, you got Metallica? How did you fucking get Metallica? I've been after Metallica for years to do something for me. How did you get Metallica? And I gave him a little bit of the background. He's like, oh my God, I got to hear this. I'm coming over to your office. So Danny comes over to my office, and Danny's the kind of guy, you think I'm chatty, Kathy? I could talk about this fucking Starbucks plastic cup for 3 hours. Danny Bramson could talk about anything for 4 days. So Danny came over to my office, and we literally spent 7 hours in my office listening to the record again, listening to Limp Bizkit and Metallica 20 times, and Danny going, they're flawless. They're flawless. This is the greatest thing I've ever. I will talk to Tom. And, you know, again, this was my first go around with Tom. It was my first relationship. I know he had validation. I know he trusted me. It wasn't that. I know he had validation from Paramount. It wasn't that. But our relationship only went so deep. And the equity of a relationship is really something. Because the everything that I had said to Tom Cruise, he still wanted to pull the plug on the record. He trusted Danny because of the success that they had already had with Jerry Maguire. He trusted Danny because I think they were already into Vanilla Sky, and I think Danny had already gotten Paul McCartney, okay, to do the song for Vanilla Sky. And when Danny said the same things to Tom that I had been saying, and when Danny validated the giant project that this really was, and what I had done and what I had accomplished, and the Metallica of it all, and the Limp Bizkit and all of these things, Tom, to his credit, again, called me personally and said, hey, I've decided to let you go ahead with the record. Do me proud. And we did. Listen, the thing came out and was huge. I think the only reason we weren't number one was because NSYNC, of all things. So we debuted at number 2, which was tough for Tom to take. I remember I called him and I said, Tom, and I was like proud as shit. I mean, listen, I think we debuted with like 196,000 records week 1, number 2 on the chart. I said, Tom, we're number 2, 196,000 records. Of course, Tom, who's the most competitive person on the planet, why weren't we number 1? I said, this little band called In Sync did 226,000 units, and so be it. The film opened #1 in every territory of the world. The record, I think at the end of the day, as it all played out over time, I think I want to say we sold 4 million records, something like that. It was gold and platinum in every territory of the world. It was huge. Paramount loved me. It was great for my label. It was, and I tell you, it really, Drew, a giant reason that I wanted to talk to you about this today is I just, you look back on your life and you look at some projects. They're not necessarily the biggest, but they left an impression. They're all kind of, and you have merit badges from every one of them, and the next thing you know, you're looking back on a whole career and remembering and the journey. And the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack for me, it was such a remarkable, special journey, especially at that time in my life. The accomplishment that it was, the sexiness of hanging out with Tom Cruise, going to the premiere, and him coming up and hugging my wife and telling her how great I was, and apologizing for, monopolizing so much of my time on this project, but how I had come through, and the success of the movie was partly due to me, and that and it was a phenomenal project of my past, and one that really, there was nothing really in a lot of ways that comes close to. I've had a lot of success. I mean, I've been so lucky, and I've had a lot of success, but this one absolutely occupies an incredibly special place for me, about the journey, about the accomplishment, about the genre of music that it was. I don't think I can't really say that I've made another hard rock record, which is really what this was rooted in. And it's funny because I'm dealing with Lars now and Metallica on something. We licensed Nothing Else Matters, the composition, and James Newton Howard, my composer, on a movie we're doing called Jungle Cruise at Disney. We've used the composition in 2 key places in the movie for a total of about 7 minutes to tell this incredible backstory of this period movie. But James has done this orchestral version, and then I came up with the idea of, let's have some fun, and why don't we take your tracks up to Metallica's studio in San Francisco and have Lars do the drum parts, and have James Hetfield do some of the guitars, and have Rob, And so I'm dealing with Lars right now, and as well as helping him try and become an Academy member. And he, to this day, Metallica has never, the only song that they have ever written and recorded originally for a film in their entire career to this day is only I Disappear. And of course, Limp Bizkit disappeared. But this was really, again, one of their great records. And it was, it's kind of just a moment in time, man. It is a moment in time, and it was the best. What an experience. And when you're in the midst of things, God, it feels like the world's going to end, and it feels like you're never going to get through it. And, when you kind of look at it for that moment. And now when I look back on it, man, it was a flawless experience. It all worked out the way it was supposed to be. And Tom Cruise, best partner you could ever have in the world. And you know what? He asks the right questions. And other than the moment of hysteria of thinking I had to throw this record away, and that if he really was going to hold to his guns, there was nothing I could do. Removing that kind of moment of doubt, it just speaks volumes about how really smart he is, because ultimately, and it's all that really matters, I always like to preach, the process is not indicative of the outcome. And sometimes the process is fucking ugly and the outcome is brilliant, and sometimes the process is brilliant and the outcome is awful. and rarity. Every now and then you get one where the process you really look back as being awesome and the result the same. And that's what this was. And a lot of it I really do have to give the credit to, yeah, sure, my ingenuity and Never Say Die and Deep Checkbooks, but also Tom, confidence in me, and his making the right decisions when it came down to it. Signing off on Limp Bizkit, letting me go for Metallica, putting those both in the movie, and ultimately, and even though it took a call from Danny Bramson, coming around and saying, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to let him go forward with it. And here we are today, 20 years later.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other things about the soundtrack that I wanted you to talk about. One, the gold record in your office, which is like self-destructed, which Charles obviously has not seen it, but you have the coolest office, first of all. Don't tell Sean Bailey I said that, because I've also been in his office. But can you tell us the story of this kind of self-destructed gold record?
Yeah, we were very anxious. Hollywood Records, again, no success. We were really only successful as a soundtrack label, and I kept that thing alive for many, many years just on the backs of soundtracks, because we never broke an artist, ever. We had the Queen catalog, and the Queen catalog really came back majorly because of Wayne's World. And that moment put Queen back on the map, and all of a sudden that was all she wrote. So we were always very anxious to we couldn't wait. We knew we were going to be platinum. We knew we were going to be double platinum, but we couldn't wait to do a gold record. It was like, instead of waiting for platinum, it was such a big thing. We got to do one. We got to do one quickly. Let's do one quick. Let's give them out. Then we'll give out platinums. Then we'll give out. And that is a true prototype. I believe it's the only one that exists, and it was done. That's what we wanted the gold records to be, because we thought, when you looked at the poster and the way that it is, it's Tom in fire with a scar on his face and a gun, and so we just thought, it's so hot. Let's have a melting gold record. Let's have a melting gold record plaque. And we did it. And, I cannot remember why we didn't end up doing that as the official plaque and sending it around to everybody. That's not what we ended up doing. What we ended up doing was a different one with all of these little mini country flags around.
Oh, that's cool.
Around the edges, because we were gold and platinum in every territory of the world. So I don't know why we abandoned the melting record, but I kept it, and I kept it as the ultimate souvenir of the journey, and it was hot. And God, man, the best. I loved it. I love the whole project. I love that moment. I love the relationship with Paramount. I loved everything about it. So
well, it also has a very special place in history for the Metallica song being the song that brought down Napster.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, were you involved in that process at all?
Only from a standpoint that we were all, look, at that moment in the industry, we all kind of were like, wait a minute, man, this is not good. This is not good. And it didn't stop us, interesting enough at that moment, it certainly didn't stop us from selling albums. And I think, again, that was an album-y kind of moment. And I think the file sharing of it all was really more the implication of the disaster that it was going to create in the business until someone could harness it. And
right.
And so where I was involved in it was, I do remember Lars calling on a number of times wanting to enlist Disney in the battle. And as we do sometimes, we don't fight other people's fights. We fight our own. The Metallica track was a licensed track. I paid a lot of money for it, but we don't own the master. We don't own the copyright. Metallica does. They always own their own copyrights and masters. And we did not, we just didn't, because it wasn't taking away from our sales, and it wasn't yet an implication for what also the movie business would see in file sharing.
Right.
It was Disney was not going to get into that fight, and Lars was obviously very passionate about it. He was the first artist to, I think, absolutely take a stand and go against Napster. And but I do, again, that's a bit of that moment was, and I was just party to it because I happened to have a movie project and happened to have a soundtrack project and happened to have these artists. But there was something very, very, very amazing going on at that moment in music, in culture, in technology. It was a miraculous time. And, look, I mean, I think in some ways, thank God Napster came along. I mean, I know, like anything, it's got to evolve out, and it's got, the process is not indicative of the outcome. No one understood that what we were at that moment was the beginning of a process that was going to need to take place to ultimately get way down the line and where we are today. The major record companies certainly weren't going to go there. And it took a renegade, as it always does. It took a reckless renegade to go out there and bust through the glass ceiling to create something that would end up defining and ultimately saving the record business. What's saved the record business right now? It's file sharing. Okay, that's what saved the whole damn thing. We've been in this barren. I mean, look, it turned it on its head. It changed it from an album business to a single business, and then a paid download business to a subscription business. And yeah, it did all of those things, but I mean, now it's the saving grace of the music industry. And so yeah, that was clearly a historic moment that we were all dealing with there. And I think more than anything, we were, with the whole Metallica thing and Napster and all that, we were just innocent bystanders who happened to be party to something that was the result of something else that we had done and created. But yeah, Lars was very passionate about it, and unfortunately at the time, though I agreed, the Disney company was not going to get into that battle right then and there.
Right. You've worked with some amazing other artists, including Daft Punk, who I chatted with you about a number of years ago. Do you have any Daft Punk stories you want to share that maybe you haven't shared before, or
wow.
Charles is also a big fan of the robots. Like myself.
I mean, really to date, it really has all been about what we did on Tron and about their ingenuity, their creativity, their process. Their process is so interesting.
You bought them the studio that they made Random Access Memories in?
We put that together. We built that studio there piece by piece at Henson. And, they've got a phenomenal manager in Paul Hahn, who also, he's really the third robot, if you want to call it that. And really helps them with the business. As a matter of fact, I had lunch with him just before this pandemic thing. I had lunch with him, and we were kind of talking about, Daft Punk. They're the greatest, laziest artists out there. They've got 1 trillion ideas, but they just really, Paul and Daft Punk's philosophy is leave money on the table. Because if you leave the money on the table, it leads to something else, and something else bigger. But think about these guys. They crank out, and I think I told you the story. I was with them when we ran into Pharrell. We were in London recording the strings, on the score for Tron. and we ran into Pharrell and went up to his hotel room and, had some fun. And it was right then and there that, Pharrell was asking Daft Punk to produce him. And Daft Punk, Thomas, said, I'll produce you if you'll produce me. And the next thing I know, a year later, 2 years, whatever it was, Random Access Memories comes out, and it's genius, and it wins Record of the Year. Well, what would any other artist do? They'd fucking tour off the back and make $1 trillion. Does Daft Punk do one show? Do they tour? No. Do they do Coachella that year? No. Do they nothing. No follow-up. No follow-up whatsoever. As a matter of fact, we haven't heard from them.
No.
Since, how long ago was Random Access? It's
2013.
2013, right.
2013.
So it's 7 years.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
And listen, undoubtedly they're cooking up something. I mean, I had lunch with Paul Hahn to kind of talk about that, now with Disney Plus, I think there's opportunities for us to be creating content that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to create, because we're in the movie business, we're in the big movie business, and unless it's a big movie idea, we don't make small movies, we don't, we're only after, basically $1 billion box office hits, and on the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, it's a very narrow sleeve to operate in, and Disney Plus, I think, is going to afford us the opportunity to expand and get much more diversified in the kind of content we can create. And, Daft Punk has a bit of a television and movie development company and all kinds of things they're into, businesses they're into. And I lunched with Paul Hahn to further a bit of a starting conversation about that we're looking at making a sequel to Tron now. We're looking at making a Tron 3. And we've got a great script. I mean, a really phenomenal script that we're very excited about. And whereas the timing wasn't right to have done it years ago, I think we feel like the timing is right now. And we learned a lot of lessons from that last movie. And so, Paul and I are always about, look, the right and first thing to do is to try to bring Daft Punk back, and would they want to? And, the answer is they're open to anything and everything, but you got to take it as it comes and see what the circumstances are. And we don't even know who'll be directing it yet. I mean, I think we're hopeful that Joe Kosinski would come back and do another one. Joe just, speaking of Tom Cruise, Joe just directed Top Gun 2.
Yeah, we were just in his office the other day, and we saw the little model of the ship from Oblivion. And we were talking to Tommy Harper, and it was great.
Yeah, he's a fantastic, amazing director and visual. Like that guy, he really, Joe Kosinski actually sees it. Like he can see it, so a lot of things got to fall into the right places, but certainly there's an open-mindedness of it. And as you said, I was also talking to Paul that, I always want to keep them abreast of the fact that what we're doing with the Tron music and how we're continuing to try and keep it alive. We're doing the vinyl now with Mondo. We're going to reissue the remix record, if you remember the remix record that we did, D-Rez. And that was a great record. Boy, there are some phenomenal tracks on that. And, we do a big licensing business with the original Daft Punk score and those de-resed tracks that came out of that. And Paul and the boys never really cared about that, and they were always very much like, look, Mitchell, you've got the rights to do whatever you want. The only thing we'd ask you is, we trust you, just use your good taste. Don't license a Daft Punk score cue for an embarrassing piece of product that could come back and strike at our credibility. And so for years they've just entrusted me, and I've been kind of an executor of that estate of music, so to speak. And we do a huge business with that. So it was nice to catch up with Paul on that. And we were talking about let's talk about some of the Daft Punk TV projects. Let's talk about series. Let's talk about interesting ideas. Let's talk about movies. There's got to be something that these guys, they're so credible. With Disney Plus, we are definitely looking, on the one hand, it's extremely branded, but like I said, it's an opportunity to stretch out a little bit. We just did a deal to acquire the produced, filmed Broadway version of Hamilton. We got the rights. We're going to put that out theatrically, and they shot that over 3 nights, some with an audience, some without, so they could play up on some camera techniques that would be disruptive to an audience, but with no audience there, they can shoot it a little bit more like a movie, so it'll have a little bit more cinematic value. Because if you could imagine watching any filmed Broadway show, other than maybe some zoom-ins from the back of the room over people's heads, it's not very exciting and dynamic to look at, even though that show is as brilliant as it is. So we're excited about, for Disney Plus, we're excited about not only putting that out theatrically, we're excited about that running on Disney Plus. That's leading to some other things. So now's listen, other than a fucking pandemic that's shut everybody down and crippled, caught our company in a very unique triangulation of business interruptions. Disney Plus is booming, banging. And we're looking at ways to expand that brand. So looking at all kinds of content for that. But it's an exciting time in the business. And, once we're past this pandemic, which I know we will get past, there's going to be such a boom of film and television content, of pent up, both things that were stopped in pre-production, production, and post-production process, that were stopped, that will be restarted. But also, one of the brilliant silver linings, opportunities of the pandemic is the development that can take place now. Ultimate focus, at home, no disruptions of lunches and dinner meetings. It's a tremendous opportunity for our development area to advance a lot of properties, so that we're not just ready to turn the lights on of all the things that we stalled. We are ready to put a lot of new content into production as well, because we're going to need it. We're not only going to need to get back up and running, we're going to need to make up for lost time. And I think the whole industry is going to be doing that. It's like 1,000 thoroughbred horses all lined up in a starting gate that was only built for 15. I wish I owned sound stages. I wish I owned post-production facilities. Right at the moment, they're bleeding, they're going to be hurting, but man, just wait till the tap gets turned back on. There won't be enough stages in the world to accommodate the kind of production that's going to need to take place for everybody to get out there and get caught up. So, bittersweet for sure, but yeah. What else can I tell you?
Well, Charles had a question, I think, before we go.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly ask you about Danny Elfman. You've done a couple projects with him, and I just wanted to see if you had any stories about Elfman. He's my favorite composer, so I just wanted to hear.
Wow, absolutely one of my favorite composers too, and just a wonderful, witty, interesting. He lives up to what you want your talent to be. Okay. Yeah. Volatile. Yeah. A little insecure. Yeah. A little bold. Yeah. A little colorful. Yeah. He lives up to what you want your talent to be. The fact is, so many composers that I deal with, they're kind of like writers, like they're not incredibly extroverted people. A composer, like a writer who writes a screenplay or a novel, I would absolutely say they are artists. Of course, they're artists. But when we talk about artists, we usually talk about it in the sense of an entity that has an artistic stamp, an artistic quality to them that is unlike anybody else. There's a lot of phenomenal composers working in this industry today who do a lot of great scores, amazing scores, But those scores, other than what the movie requires in identity, don't necessarily really have such artistic identity to them that you can pick them out of a field of other action scores or other romantic scores or other what have yous. And, you know, the thing about Elfman, the thing about Danny is, I mean, that guy really is an artist. I mean, I think it's most evident, obviously, when he works with Tim Burton, and certainly I've been involved in a lot of those movies, from Alice in Wonderland to Frankenweenie to A Nightmare Before Christmas. You know, he's obviously worked at Disney a lot, and that was because Tim has worked at Disney a lot. And I honestly have to say that probably Danny Elfman's work with Tim Burton has such a signature to it that you can always identify it. It doesn't sound like anything else. People have copped it, people have ripped it, but the authentic thing there is like nothing else. And that's really because you've got these two artists together who share this singular vision. But I think Danny is not just one of the greatest. I really, there are so few composers that you can say, I know what he sounds like. They all write great. They all do wonderful arrangements and do brilliant things with woodwinds or brass, or, you know, I think Hans Zimmer is obviously another one of those guys who does that. But even Hans, in a certain respect, you're really hard pressed to point to another composer, and in this case, and his relationship with that director, that has yielded absolutely identifiable, unmistakable, artistic signatures of compositional scores. So I've had a great time with Danny. He is always, I love watching him work. You know, he is a genius. The way he thinks, the colors that he uses, he's so funny. I've often, every time I'm with him, I'm always like, man, do you know what it would mean to the world if you would go back out with Oingo Boingo? And I think I heard something. Is he going? Is Oingo Boingo reuniting were they going to reunite for Coachella? Was he?
No, I think he was doing a show. Maybe he was going to bring him out, but it was going to be like when Zimmer did that thing at Coachella a few years ago. It was going to be just a live.
He was going to do one, and maybe he was going to do an Oingo Boingo song or something. Yeah.
Well, like, you know, like at the Hollywood Bowl shows, he would always do like Dead Man's Party. Or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I said to him, like, man, I was such a big Oingo fan. Dude, you could sell out every night and like major. Why don't you? And he's like, never. I'm never going to do it. It's not about whether or not I love those guys, because I do, but, you know, we lasted 10 years too long as it was. You know, but I love sparring with him and asking him that question, because I know it's going to get one of those responses from him. But yeah, he has a very unique way of working. He has a unique team that he calls to work with him, and watching him and Tim work is just cuckoo. Tim pacing around the room, Danny kind of like waiting for a response, a thought, Tim's nervous energy, Danny's nervous energy. Really, the two of them working together is like nothing else. It's not like Danny working with another filmmaker. I'm trying to think of what other movies that Danny has done for us that weren't Tim films, because the dynamic the only dynamic I know.
Well, really, Oz
with Danny. Well, yeah, Oz. Yep. And Oz, because Oz was definitely a different one. It was very much Danny's Tim sound. You know, I mean, it really was doing that kind of score again, lush orchestra and heart and reveal of character and journey with then quirkiness, craziness, colorful. The look of Oz, our Oz, was similar to the look of a Tim movie, and then what we ended up doing, Danny did come and score Alice Through the Looking Glass, which was not Tim directing, it was James Bobin. And Danny did again. He always does a phenomenal score, and he did a great Tim-like score. But the movie just wasn't, it's again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that was one of those where we really should not have ventured into making a sequel because it was just forced, tried too hard. Johnny went from being embraceable and lovable and to being creepy. And it just that one just did not gel. But Elfman's one of my favorite composers too. And again, a lot of it is because, I love the guy, and he's a phenomenal, interesting personality, but I cannot tell you how lacking our industry is of composers who truly have an artistic, identifiable signature. And he is one of those. John Williams is one of those. Tom Newman, when he started, because he had that kind of American Beauty, kind of modern adult alternative sound that he had kind of invented, that guys like Chris Beck and Rolf Kent and some of those guys have gone off and made meals out of, that really started with Tom and his invention. But still, even when you go and listen to the Shawshank Redemption, God, it's just one of the great scores, absolutely, of all time, and melodic, and just the it's really glorious. You can't necessarily say that you can point to that. I know, I tell you, just somebody else just popped in my mind that very much has that signature sound when, in particular, he works with a group of filmmakers, and that is Carter Burwell with Coen Brothers movies.
Right.
Carter Burwell with Coen Brothers movies, going back to Raising Arizona, and there is just a signature of quirkiness and an approach and sonics that you can spot. I like to think I can spot Carter Burwell's woodwind arrangements, because he does, not that he doesn't do amazing things with everything, but he's got a particular approach to his woodwinds and the movement of them and the melodics of it that I find is like nobody else. Look, Hans is the muscular, oftentimes side of things. What he does in blending synth underbellies with orchestral overtones, what he did with our Pirates movies were epic. What he did with Inception was unparalleled, really. I think that score stands alone as something that is so unique in its voice and approach and everything else. And he's definitely had a lot of those. I find a lot of these guys that when they slip to, there's some of the Batman movies accomplish that too. It's just when any of them are forced to crawl into that kind of action box, that Marvel box, that I'm not really sure there's a defining sound to them. I think they're great scores. I think they service the movies. They accomplish so tremendously what they need to accomplish, and as a whole, it all comes together in this exquisite manner. But action films, kind of in general, they have to be almost in some ways a bit generic to their approach. Otherwise, they can't do the pushing.
Right.
They can't do the pace and the pushing that needs to happen. And it's few and far between where you get a composer who really steps out with an action score that is kind of defining in its sound. I will say, of course, listen, the Marvel movies, what Brian Tyler has done with some of them, what Alan Silvestri did with the Avenger movies. Big melodies, big themes. It's just so hard in this world. There's very few scores that you walk away from. You can't hum them. You don't. You don't remember them. Why do we remember all of those John Williams scores? Why do we I know they're simple. I know they are what they are. Was it just that time and he occupied that space, and maybe it's impossible to do that now? Maybe you can't. washed over with so much content, so much that it's impossible for our brains to lock into the melodies? Or are the melodies really not that memorable? That
Right.
Because of the process, I have such disdain for some of our process in scoring films, most specifically, and I know it's necessary, but I hate it. You know, we shoot the film, we assemble the film, we temp the film, we test the film. We cut the film, we temp the film more, we test the film, we cut the film, we temp the film more, we test the film. And then we finally get the numbers to where we want them to be in the testing process. And then we turn back to our composer and we've temped the movie not with our composer's score. We've temped the movie with a bunch of scores we've pulled from all these other movies, from all these other places to create this temp score, because you don't want to go and spend you don't want to shoot your whole wad, spend all your money producing a score and then test your movie and find out the movie's not working. You got to change it and then you got to go back and re-record it. You know, scores are millions and millions of dollars to record when you're doing them fully and orchestrally. And certainly you do have the synth mock-up process now, which makes it different. But then you've got to have your composer in tow for literally 2 years, okay, through the whole process. So we temp the movies, and temp lets in these outside forces, and you finally get the numbers at your test screenings, and you turn back to your composer and say, great news, the movie's a hit. Now, go do your original score, but basically don't fuck it up. And these are the beats that worked. And then we're forever A-Bing the original score that the composer's doing with the temp score. Well, the temp score really worked well here. Let me tell you why it really worked well here, because it's this and that and the other thing. No, the temp is working because you temped Max Richter's giant theme that was used, licensed for Arrival, and it wasn't done as a score theme. It's a modernist interpretation of a classical piece. It's scores don't sound like that. They don't do that. It doesn't observe, and so you end up chasing your temp. And I think that's why 90% of the scores in Hollywood movies could go in any other film of it,
right,
of the like kind. I think it turns everything generic, and very rarely. And again, this gets talks to the Daft Punk of it all. Daft Punk on Tron, man, we never put any score in that movie that wasn't originally created for Daft Punk for that movie. Those guys dropped 60 minutes of music and ideas on us before Joe Kosinski ever went off and shot a frame. Okay? Now, you can't do that always. We only could do that because this was Daft Punk's first film. They locked themselves in a studio for literally a year and a half, almost 2 years. They gave of themselves. They pushed everything else out. Most composers can't do that. They've got 5 other films, 10 other films that they're doing over a period of a year and a half. And so, I have great contempt for our temping process and what it does in genericizing our movie scores, but so be it. It is what it is, and I think that's why it's really hard to come up with a defining original score, is because you can't just leave it with your composer from day one and say, just nail it, baby. Don't let's not temp anything in there. Just go off an original idea and the original seed, and let's go that route. I like those opportunities, and I look forward to doing them more and more, but it has to be the right opportunity with the right filmmakers, the right schedule, and everything else. But anyways, blah, blah, blah.
Well, we've taken up way too much of your time already, but thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us these amazing stories, and happy 20th Mission Impossible 2.
Can you believe it, man? I can't believe, I love it. I'm happy to speak to you guys again. It's a project that means a lot to me, and it's really, looking back and thinking about it 20 years ago, like, wow, whoa. I'd say, where did the time go? But I know exactly where it went. But thank you for having me. And,
and next time you talk to Elfman, you got to say, go on their show, because he did the score for the first one.
Oh, absolutely right. He did. You're absolutely right. He did the score for the first one. I was just on watching TV the other day, and I was watching you ever see the movie Midnight Run?
Yeah, of
with
course.
Robert De Niro? That is one of Danny. Strangely, think about that score. Like, that is such a different kind of like bluegrassy score for Elfman to have done, and it still holds up today. And he is truly phenomenal and one of the greatest. I look forward to working with him again. But anyways, guys, oh my God, 1 hour 41 minutes. I hope I set a record.
Bird beat you, but it's close.
Brad Bird beat me? Damn it. Well, you know what? He's more important than me. He should. He should. Okay?
Have a great weekend.
Stay safe. Be healthy. Yeah, absolutely. Take care.
All right, we're back. Charles, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, at the end there, Mitchell was talking about how long, he wanted to be the number one, and we had to sadly inform him that Brad Bird had him beat. But now, of course, since then, McQuarrie has beaten them both with our longest interview, although Simon Pegg, Haley Atwell, and Lauren Balfe probably deserve some credit as well.
Well, Mitchell, you put up the good fight, and you talked a lot, and we loved listening. I'll say that.
Yeah, a lot of stuff to dig into here. I mean, how he and James Newton Howard are repurposing a classic Metallica song for key scenes in Jungle Cruise, and the guys from Metallica are actually playing on it. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. He loves, he's the only person that's really worked with Metallica on a soundtrack before, and he's done it twice, which is pretty impressive, I gotta say.
And then there's also the Tron 3 stuff, that they have a great script. They want to bring back Daft Punk. They're hoping they'll get Joseph Kosinski to come back. I mean, I'm down for Tron 3.
If the Snyder Cut can happen, then God, let's get Tron 3 going.
Yes, please. I also wanted to give an update on Hamilton, because he talks about that in here. There's, of course, I don't know if you've seen in the news, but there is going to be no more theatrical release for Hamilton. It is actually coming to Disney Plus July 3rd, so it'll be there, just in a few weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm excited to finally see it. I know you saw it a few years ago, but that'll be a lovely Independence Day weekend treat for everybody to be able to watch that at home.
Yeah. I also, it was interesting to hear him talk about film scores at the end there. He kind of gets in the weeds at the end of this interview talking about film scores and what's wrong with film scores today, or maybe not what's wrong, but why we don't see big melodies anymore in film scores. And he provides his theory for how we essentially over-temp the movie. We temp it over and over again, and he talks about how, basically temping the movie is the devil. And that's interesting. It goes, obviously, McQuarrie always talks about he does not put temp music on his movies. And with Tron Legacy, they did the same process that McQuarrie does. They had Daft Punk record a bunch of music ahead of time, and they were working with them all along as the movie was cutting and everything. And that's, it's a really great system of doing it. I think not everybody has that leeway to do it, and it seems like that is a really good way to do it. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I have thoughts about Mitchell sitting on hours and hours of unreleased Daft Punk music on his computer and and wanting to break into his office in the middle of the night and just to listen to things.
Oh yes, I'll get in the ventilation shaft above, and I'll lower you in.
Okay, good, we can do it. I remember when I was in his office, he was like, "You want to hear the Jay-Z song?" Because the movie originally ended with a Jay-Z song that he had done with Daft Punk, and I just knew he was scrolling through the files, and I could just see how much stuff he had, and it was like, ugh.
What? Did he play it for you?
Oh, yeah, he played it for me. He's got a great sound system in his office, which does not surprise you, and so we sat there and bumped the Jay-Z song. It was pretty great.
Yeah.
I love Mitchell. He is a wonderful guy, and I love that we could talk for so long about this, and it's a key part of as you said, it's a key part of the sort of mystique of Mission Impossible 2, and a key part, I think, of what makes it such a time capsule for the year 2000. But also, it was a big reason, I think, for the success of the movie. It was the biggest movie that year, and it was until I think Fallout, it was the biggest entry in the entire franchise. And I think that this soundtrack sort of opened it up to a whole other audience that it maybe wouldn't have had. So I give him a lot of credit for that.
I think Cruise even told him that. That's what he said to us, was that Mitchell's sort of responsible for this movie being the #1 movie of the year in 2000. I mean, part of that was this movie was a phenomenon, and part of that was because of the soundtrack.
Yeah, it was everywhere. And if you go look, you can just see how many singles came off of that. I mean, it wasn't just the Metallica and Limp Bizkit. I think that the Rob Zombie song and maybe the Butthole Surfer song were both singles and got a lot of alternative radio play. And it's interesting that soundtracks aren't as big a deal anymore. I think in the 90s and early 2000s, they were huge.
Yeah.
And they've kind of lost their luster, which is sort of disappointing. But I think this was one of the last big ones that just everyone bought, everyone listened to. It was on the radio. It was on MTV. And so, yeah, it was kind of nice to go back to a simpler time, a time before a Napster lawsuit was triggered by this album.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was fun.
So happy 20th anniversary to I-2. We conclude our I-2 little tribute. Obviously, we'll come back to I-2 for other stuff. But continuing with the music theme and going back to McCory and his approach to music with his movies, let's announce who we have coming on the show for the next 2 weeks.
Okay, we've got Joe Kramer, composer for Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation, and a bunch of other McCory projects. And it was really exciting to get to talk to him. And I can't wait for people to listen. Yeah,
I know that there have been some people who've been asking us to, are you going to get Joe Kramer on the show? You're going to get him. And so, hey, we did it. And we got him coming on next couple weeks. So we're excited to share that interview with you.
Recorded live from the Glendale, California public library.
That was right before this whole thing started, the whole pandemic. It was actually as it was starting. I remember we were all a little nervous to be getting together.
To be in a library.
Yeah, so that's exciting stuff for next week. As always, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/LightTheFuse. Sign up for bonus content. There's so much stuff, so many exciting things you can get out of that. Our commentaries for all the movies, tons of bonus episodes and interviews and all kinds of fun stuff. So please sign up. It really helps the show. And thank you to all of you who do already do that. And specifically, a thank you to Jacob Ballard.
And just to remind everybody, this episode is brought to you by Real Estate Interests, LLC, commercial real estate for growing companies.
Look at that. We got a new sponsor.
I can't believe it.
Pretty exciting.
I'm actually very happy with the way that the Patreon is going. And I want to thank everybody. We are very close to breaking even, which means we are very close to paying off our exorbitant debt. So it's all very exciting.
I think we've actually hit it. I think we're breaking even now. We're past it even.
Oh, okay. Good. And if you want to become a Patreon member, do it. You'll get great stuff. Charles and I are sweating every week about coming up with the best product for you guys every week. So just know that we're working hard on it, and you'll get a lot of great exclusive material that nobody else gets. So do it.
Yeah. And if not, you can always go to our TeePublic page, linked from our website, lightthefusepodcast.com. It's in the merch section. You can see our shirts and hats. Well, we don't have hats. Ooh, we should get hats. Anyway.
We should get hats.
We have masks, shirts, masks, pins, stickers, computer cases, laptop, whatever, phone cases, all kinds of stuff.
Baby onesies.
Baby onesies, true. I've got one of those.
Yeah.
So, not for me, for my child. She's outgrown it already, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah, check it out. And if not, you can always just write us a review. That really helps us. Write a review, spread the word. And thank you all so much for listening every week.
We'll be back next week with Joe Kramer, Part 1.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.